With the flick of her pen, she writes.
Well, here we are for the next chapters 6 and 7, and we will see what comes of these. Hopefully they're maybe lighter chapters than the prior two, but let's go ahead and get started with chapter 6, Up in the Rafters. And as usual here, any healing or commentary or divine guidance or advice or whatever will be time-stamped and be at the end of these two chapters, at the end of this show. Up in the Rafters. Moxie had it all figured out, and it might even be a little fun to go on with this charade, she thought, as she spooned some vegan cream in her coffee. I can always back down a notch if Diego doesn't want to play along, she thought, but somehow she knew that he would. As she sipped the strong brew, Diego came and sat down beside her, brushing up against her with a love in his heart. This girl was really starting to grow on him, he thought, as he could feel the heat emanating from him, from her, from him and her. Oh, it's already starting. How you doing, girl? He said playfully. How's that rose tattoo? He asked, still a little concerned about how and why it was there. It seems to be fading a little, she said, opening her shirt to expose herself to him. See what I mean? She said, looking at him square in the eyes. Oh, yeah, he said, reaching out to touch the mark, which was right over her left breast. He moved his hand down gently to caress her, and just then the mudroom door opened and Edgar stepped in with flask in hand. Diego quickly pulled his hand away, but Moxie, not being deterred in her nakedness in any form, she is a stripper, by the way, if you don't recall, left her shirt open so Edgar could see the ever-lightening mark. It's fading, she said innocently, as Pamela entered the room to find the threesome pondering over the strange occurrence. Moxie, out of respect for the older woman, buttoned up her blouse slowly. Well, Edgar, any ideas about what caused it? Diego said, both curious and nervous about it at the same time. Well, the guides say it's a foreshadowing of something to come, Edgar said, as if this thing happened all the time. Just like the box we found before the screech was brought down, he said, looking in the cupboards for a bottle to fill the flask. I want to try to find that box again, he said. Does anyone recall where we last saw it? Everyone's memory was cloudy on where they were the last time the box had disappeared. Well, I guess I'll just have to set the intention, oh, Fraggles, to summon it and wait for it to appear. Oh, boy. That would have been. Never mind. That's supposed to be Edgar. Moxie, you're probably not going to like what I have to say next, but I think you're going to play a part in this demon Stallion affair. I've got a pretty good feel on that, he said. What do you think? You ready to save the world again? Moxie wasn't so sure what he meant about that, and she really had her heart set on working this thing out with Diamond. So she simply nodded her head and softly said, whatever it takes. I really love it here, and I don't want harm to come to anyone, she said, looking at Pamela for affirmation. Is it okay, ma'am, if I stay a little longer? Pamela was in the best mood at the moment, anticipating her much-needed time away, and it had been perfect divine timing for Moxie to ask that question. Of course, dear. Take as much time as you need. It's the least we can do with what you saving us all from harm, she said with a warm smile, much warmer than it had been in a while, because love has a way of permeating like that. Of course, the house may be a little quieter than normal this weekend, she continued, thinking her going away message would be more easily conveyed in a group setting, lest Edgar take offense that she was somehow trying to move away from him. I'm taking some much-needed time away this weekend and heading up to Gentle Waters later today, she said nonchalantly. I really need this, and I hope y'all can understand, she said, eyeing Edgar, who always seemed to be harder to read than most people. But inside, he knew this was the right thing for her to do, and he moved around to where she was standing to envelop her in his strong arms. You just make sure I get to see you alone before you leave, he said, squeezing her lightly. "This man needs a proper goodbye," he said, as he hardened against her. "You know it," she said, moving into him so slightly that any onlooker couldn't see, but which was deeply felt by the two lovers. "You both are making me want to go on a trail ride myself," Diego said, feeling a heat all his own. "Come on, Moxie, let's see what we can see on this old ranch. What do you say?" he said, touching her arm and longing to be touching much more of her. "Let's saddle up after lunch." "Sounds good," she said, hoping some fresh air would help bolster the plan she was going to share with him. "Let's do it," she said, smiling. And for that moment, all hearts were willing and loving participants in the often challenging game of love, each one vying for some attention from the other, not realizing that the intention within was the most important tool in honoring affections with another. Oh, not another one. At that moment, a cry went up from the barn, and the silence of the loving hearts was shattered again by a shrillness in the air. Edgar felt it first and knew at once what was occurring. "He's shown himself," he said, taking steps back towards the door, leaving the flask open on the counter. "Everyone stay inside while I check it out," he said, closing the door while simultaneously calling in protection from Archangel Michael and his guides. He needed the strength of his mountain lion familiar right now, and so he embodied her, knowing it would be better than not to. He felt the stealthiness of his feet as the spirit of the larger cat took over, and he knew in the darkness of the barn he could use some cunning cat eyes to discern whatever was out there. He slowly opened the barn door, wondering who had screamed, but not unfathomed by it, since the screech had always made itself known that way as well. Why did darker energy always need to get loud to make a point? He knew it could never prevail over the light, but it sure made a big old ruckus trying. His foot crunched on dry hay as the barn door creaked open. His eyes quickly adjusted to the dimmer light as he stepped inside. His inner sight was drawn upwards and into a darker corner of the rafters, and it was there that he saw it. The demon eyes, red and glaring, and then it, whatever it was, let out a shrill scream and then cackling like that of a sickened hen. But this was no hen, his guides warned him to step lightly. He surrounded himself in golden light and grabbed the sword of light he had borrowed from Archangel Michael. "I banish you into the light," he said, somewhat mightily, as he always felt more assured of his power when his guides were around him. But whatever it was didn't want to go so easily, and as a light began to fill the barn, whatever it was swooped down on him. With the large wings flapping and those hellish bright eyes, he could sense the darkness surround him. As it swooped past him, he heard a grave voice say, "You will not win this time. Thunder Rose is ours." And then dark wings and ghostly muttering made way to silence as the barn was enveloped in an ethereal light. Edgar shuddered at the sickening feel of it and dropped to his knees, thanking his guides for their support, a sickness tugging at his stomach as he fell backwards into the dirt. He was shaking from the thought of it, and he vowed that this darkness was not going to overtake him or anyone else at Thunder Rose. Not on his watch. Chapter 7, Trail Ride. Edgar rose and composed himself. No sense in getting everyone riled up just yet. He still wasn't exactly sure what he was dealing with, so he brushed himself off and started back towards the house. He looked up at the second story and saw Amber watching him from her bedroom window. "I need to talk to this young girl," he thought, wondering why his guides always tasked him with these hard discussions lately. Heck, several weeks ago he was happily on a trail ride and oblivious to all these happenings, and now here he was counseling young teens and summoning spirit guides, constantly warding off threats to his newly discovered loved ones. He hadn't realized how fiercely he loved this ranch and his girl until he had been threatened with losing everything, and somehow a wooden box and a young girl had saved them from everything evil. Now here they were again threatened and depending on someone who really had no idea what she was doing. His mind went to Moxie and the rose stigmata, and he pondered its significance in the current state of affairs. As he reached the porch, he was met by Moxie and Diego. "You okay, Edgar?" Diego asked, eyeing the older man who looked a little worn around the edges. Yeah, there's just something I got to do right now, he said, eyeing the couple's boots and heavier jackets. You two going riding, he asked, concerned. Yeah, it's such a great afternoon, Moxie said lightly. I could really use some time away from all the hustle and bustle. I've got to talk to Diego, and there's not a lot of privacy around here, she said, giggling, and reminded of how they had interrupted the older couple earlier that morning. I know what you mean, Edgar said, winking at her. You two be careful out there. There's something afoot, but I haven't quite figured it out yet, he said, heading inside. We will, Diego said, leading Moxie towards the barn. I want a gentle horse this time, Moxie said, wanting a peaceful and harmonious ride. Anything for you, Diego said, hoping she would catch on to that. He stopped to look in her eyes. You really mean that, cowboy? She said, looking into his eyes. I do, he replied, pulling her into him. Passion and heat filled the air around the two, and he broke from a passionate kiss. If we keep up like that, we may not make that ride, he said, somewhat surprised at himself for not leading her into the nearest stall and laying her down on the hay. I have something I want to talk to you about anyway, she said, smoothing her hair back. I'm a little nervous about it, so let's get moving before I change my mind, she said, trying to pull the plan together in her mind. Diego chose two of the gentlest horses, Brickle and Butternut, and they saddled up, making sure they had snacks and plenty of water for themselves and the horses. 600 acres could get pretty desolate far away from home if you weren't paying attention. Diego didn't want to make the same mistake he had made on his first ride out of the ranch several years ago. It was then he had realized just how unforgiving the land could be if you weren't prepared. Getting caught several miles out by the river with no food and fresh water, he had no survival skills and had fallen from his horse. It took the whole day and half the night for Luke and Billy to locate him in the deep woods, and Diego had seen things in the trees that made him shudder. Thunder Rose Woods didn't want outsiders inside her bounds, and at the time, he was just that. Let's go this way, he motioned, towards the pasture land to the east, and Moxie moved her horse along to follow him. They rode in silence quite a ways until they reached a ridge overlooking a deep valley with the river below. Let's stop here for a while, he said, stopping his horse to look out over the vista. Phew, I thought you'd never say that, Moxie said, laughing. I guess it's been longer than I thought, she said, rubbing her lower back. She had forgotten how riding could leave the back and bottom smarting if you hadn't been up on the horse for a while. She dismounted and looked out over the peaceful scenery. Now this is something else, she said, happier now than she had been in a while. I really needed this, Diego. Thank you, she said, moving closer to him. I need to get serious for a moment, she said, getting nervous again. Sit down with me? She spread a blanket down on the hard grass and pulled out the secret basket of goodies she had asked Marguerite to pack for them. He sat a little bewildered about what this serious conversation could be. Everything okay with you, he asked, hoping she wasn't going to tell him she wanted more space, or worse yet, that she was leaving again. I have a business proposition for you, she said, working up the nerve to continue. I want to get away from Diamond and the Pink Lady for good, and I think you can help me with a plan to make that happen. She paused to gaze his reaction and only saw attentive blue eyes watching her, so she continued. The only way Diamond lets a girl off the hook, so to speak, is if they're married or pregnant, and I'm definitely not pregnant, she laughed nervously. Diego, will you marry me? There, she had said it and almost faltered, uncertain of his true feelings for her. His sandwich caught in his throat. Moxie, he said softly. I knew it was too much to ask, she stammered close to tears. I just thought, I could get away from that life, to do something better with myself, she said, getting teary-eyed. But you don't have to. I completely understand. She couldn't stop, embarrassed that she had even asked. Moxie, he put a finger to his lips to shush her. Yes, was all he said, as he pulled her down onto the blanket and into his strong embrace. Yes. Chapter 8. All Systems Go. Now it would have been very easy at the ranch to figure out what was going on by the feelings in the air. But if you weren't trained to notice these types of subtle energy changes, then you just didn't get it. Edgar, however, was very trained in the ways of energy work and subtle realities, and noticed a palpable change in the current of energy in and around Thunder Rose. What was causing this shift? He couldn't quite put his finger on that yet. So when in doubt, he always, with a capital A, consulted his spirit guides. After all, spirit was all-knowing, all-seeing, and ever-present. Who better to assist when you couldn't make out friend from foe, or where the next adversary might pop up next? He had pulled together all his sacred tools from the truck, and had even asked Amber to join him. If she's that curious, he thought, then let spirit speak to her in this ritual. If she really was to be his apprentice, so to speak, then she better start learning now. No time like the present. He hummed a tune out loud that his grandmother used to sing to him when he was weary and afraid. It made him feel filled up with power, and she told him to make the tune his own and call it his power song. And so he had done just that. When he needed courage or to be in his right mind, he would sing this song and feel filled with a sacred energy that he couldn't explain in words. He knew there was something going on around the ranch, and he hoped that his spirit guides would point him to the culprit. They were here to help, after all, and he felt that he needed their assistance right now. He started by lighting a sacred fire out by the campsite. He still stayed in the tents out in the pasture, even though he could have and probably should have moved into Pamela's bed. But that could come later, he thought. After they were married, he would pull out all the stops to be in the house and be by her side, as much as he was able. But he had grown up outside in the wilds, and sleeping on the ground under the stars just came naturally to him. And as he was chopping the wood for the sacred flame, he heard a rustling in the pines. He wondered if the screech were really gone for good, as the hairs on his arms came to attention. "Who's there?" he asked, with complete confidence that he was safe and protected, but not wanting another incident to surprise him like it had done on Cracker Ridge. He still couldn't forget Matilda's fall, even after all these years. Somehow he blamed himself still, even when he fully knew it was most likely a fluke accident. Yet memories of past transgressions always come flooding back when there is still healing work to be done around them. He released the memory into the light. Right now he needed to focus on the fire and Amber and getting some answers. The rustling got louder, so he placed his axe on the ground and picked up his rifle instead. Although he chided himself because no rifle could dissuade the spirits of a space that were bent on scaring a man or stirring up trouble. He put the rifle down and instead picked up a log and bent low to get closer to the pines and the sound emanating from within the tall undergrowth. It definitely wasn't an animal, he concluded, knowing that his movement in the trees would have scared off any deer or small creatures hanging around. He wasn't prepared for what he saw next. Shimmering with a golden, ethereal light, he saw the box laying on the ground under some bushes. How the heck this confounded box could know when to pop up like that confused him. Yet there it was, simple wooden box, brass cross on the lid. Yet he didn't seek out its magic right away. He let it sit there as he waited to see if anything else would show itself. Maybe someone was watching him and had placed the box there. Maybe it was all an elaborate hoax. But he didn't really believe that a hoaxer was the culprit here. Where this box was concerned, he knew that deep magic was involved, and one that he hadn't been privy to before. The light around the box beamed out at him, and he figured it was wanting to show him something, so he stepped out of the shadows and into the light. And as soon as he'd shown himself in the light, the box literally flew towards him and set itself down at his feet. The lid opened ever so slowly, and the blinding light that always preceded a sacred vision began to emanate from its core. He knew there were no baubles in this box. All right, kids, hello. Here I am for the commentary of chapters 6 through 8. Now, if you have been kind of following these audio recordings and healing sessions as they've dropped, even if you haven't, but if you have, you'll notice it's been maybe a week or so, maybe a couple of weeks since that very hairy, dark healing session that we had to do, where we pulled out a lot of darkness. And I recorded right after that, chapter 6 and 7, and then I stopped, and I was like, I don't know what I need to do next here. I'm not sure what the healing is going to be. And over those couple of weeks, there has been, it's kind of happened, the healing has kind of happened outside of, well, you're in a sacred container here with this. If you're doing the healing, we said that at the very beginning, but it's kind of happened outside of me leading you through it audibly on this tape. Maybe our higher selves have been, we've been leading through, maybe the higher selves of the spirits of the Stallion returns, and the healing spirits and guides that are here have been leading you through this outside of this recording. But there's been a big heart awakening since the last time we saw you. It's happened slowly. The guides have been working with you each day to further open the tight boundaries around your heart. If you want to go deeper with this, I am going to be doing some heart healing in Patreon. If you're not familiar with Patreon, it is another platform. It's a space for creators. It's a membership-based space. And because I did a week ahead reading there yesterday, and it was all about heart healing. We took a look at the cards, but so that's just kind of, if you want to go deeper than this, we are going to be doing that work in a more of a closed space, I guess, so to speak. I feel the energy is more potent when we're not freely out there all over the place. Somehow the energy in a closed container like that, meaning you've got to go there, you've got to sign in, and you're only in a space with a very few people that really, really want to be there. I feel like the energy's, I don't know, I'm sure I know why, but we don't have to go on a tangent on that now. But the energy is much more potent, and that's where we're going to do some of this deeper work. But and links to everything I talk about are always in the notes of anything that I do. But there's been a great heart awakening, and it's continuing. It's not done yet. For the next couple of weeks, your heart chakra is going to be wanting to drop its, not drop its boundary line, but widen its boundaries a little bit, where it's been kind of more tightly bound up because of some of the other healing work you've been doing. Your heart chakra is going to want to expand some more, and you're going to see it very subtly, like where before you might have said a grumpy good morning to somebody or not said anything at all, you'll want to engage more with people. You'll want to have more heart-to-heart conversations with people, not on trivial stuff, but on, more deeper things. Slowly, the heart is being stretched open here, which, is not something I had anticipated with this particular book. Because this particular book comes across as being kind of scary and dark. And I do find, and this is the healing, I guess, kind of in a commentary, I do find that this last chapter, I didn't know there was going to be a last chapter. I thought we were just going to do 6 and 7, and then we were going to do something, like a drum journey or something. I wasn't sure. And so it just kind of sat. And then today it was like, I kind of was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this or not. And then Mother Mary showed herself to me in a very interesting way. That the way that I get signs is very interesting. But a piece of my clothing fell on a hanger in such a way that resembled the shrouded Mother Mary, that statue that we have. And I was like, oh, Mother Mary's calling me. You need to do this. I need to do these chapters. And I'm like, but I feel like there's one more chapter. It's not just 6 and 7, it's 8. And when I try, I'm like, what is 8? I don't know. And when I opened the book to 8, the the chapter title is All Systems Go. So I'm like, oh, okay. So we were in this kind of holding pattern to let the magic of this healing happen kind of outside the realms of me reading the chapters to you. And now we're back again with you. It's All Systems Go. And I think this last few little paragraphs kind of says it all. If you look into the metaphors of, in much of my work, in my channeling, my books, we have this secret, sacred talisman that shows itself, and it only opens itself to certain people, and it only opens itself in certain occasions. Is that secret, sacred talisman the heart? They're saying it's kind of beyond that. It's more than that, the guides are saying. But in this case, in the case of the Thunder Rose Collection, it's always been the wooden box. The wooden box with with very simple, handmade, homemade, whatever, crafted wooden box with a brass cross on the lid has always shown up since the beginning of the series. In the Bringers of the Light, it's the Handbook de los Santos, this mysterious handbook that shows up. There's other books where other mysterious talismans show up. But this brass cross on the lid box is here again. It's been missing for a while. I think in a few chapters ago, people were like, where's the wooden box? We really could use you right now. It was very instrumental in bringing down the Screech in the first book. But I do find it interesting that Edgar is trying to open his heart more to, not his heart's not close to Pamela, but his heart's close a little bit. Yeah, he's a little bit more like commitment phobic, I think, because he likes his, he likes his single, not single like bachelor lifestyle, but he's just used to being by himself. And so he's been slowly, the spirits of Thunder Rose have slowly been working on him to open his heart more to Pamela, to Amber, her daughter, to Moxie and Diego, to everybody, and come out of his little gruff hermit mode. And I do think that these last channeled chapters, the box finally appears to him again. And I don't know, it's because he's getting ready to do this this ceremony, and it seems like he's deciding to bring in Amber as an apprentice. That's a big step for him, a big step. Not just as a potential, what is it? Daughter-in-law, not daughter-in-law, stepdaughter, whatever. But as an apprentice of his work to teach her, and she's wanting to do this. And so his heart's slowly opening to that. And then the box shows itself. How does it know? What's this magic? Is this box really real? He kind of questions it a little bit, and then he's like, no, I don't think it's somebody like doing this. I think he thinks like, somebody just randomly putting this box there. And he's like, no, because he's got too much experience with it to know that it's not of this. It's not of this world. It's not of the 3D world. And I do like the last chapter of the light around the box beamed out at him, and he figured it was wanting to show him something. So he stepped out of the shadows and into its light. And as soon as he's shown himself in the light, then the box literally flew towards him and set itself down on his feet, opened ever so slowly, and the blinding light that always preceded a sacred vision began to emanate from its core. As soon as he stepped out of the shadows and into the light, these healings, mystery, inner mysteries, mystical powers, whatever's in this box, become available to him, and not just to him, to anybody. Many people on the ranch have seen the box. Moxie experienced it and couldn't even stay conscious in its light. She ended up, like in book 1, I think she ended up passing out after it opened itself to her. So where is this going? Is there any other healing we need to do right now? They're saying not at this time. This is a time over the next couple of weeks to allow the magic to happen. Allow the box or whatever talisman you want to use as a proxy for sacredness and universal love and universal magic. Allow that to come to you and show itself and work its magic on you. And say yes. That was a big theme. If you watch our Almost Daily shorts, it's a big theme today. Is like, say yes. Say yes to the dress. Say yes to the healing. If it comes to you and it feels right, get out of your comfort zone and say yes. And I think that's what's happening here is as we slowly move through this book, people whose hearts have been closed. Not everybody's heart is closed here. Edgar, he's got some boundaries in the heart space. Got to work with Pamela. Got some work to do. Diego and Moxie, they still have still have some work to do. Everybody's got some work to do. And slowly, as we pluck on through these pages, people's hearts are going to open even further, even through the darkness that shows itself within and around Thunder Rose Ranch. No matter the adversary, be it the Screech or Scarried, or the Black Stallion, who hasn't really scared me yet because he's more like, he hasn't really shown himself. This Raptors gang people I'm more like, what are they up to? The rat on the door and all that. What's happening here? So I'm going to leave it at that, and we'll just see what happens next. Might be interesting to, I'm not a journaling person, but if you're a journaling person, the person who likes to journal or write things down about what's going on in your experience, or document this part of your journey, it might be good for the next couple of weeks to, do some sort of photo journaling or journaling of what's happening with you, what you're finding out along the way. Of this particular healing series, how this magic is outflowing and overflowing for you and what it's bringing in for you. So until then, friends, until we meet again with Chapter 9, we will see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. It has been brought to you by the Bringers of the Light, an etheric group of higher light beings focused on service to Gaia, humanity, and the self as it pertains to the spiritual journey. So they are here to support you on your path to love and to working with others. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.